Can you explain the symbolism of tongues? I'm Catholic and there's a charismatic movement in my parish that troubles me, but I don't know enough about it to decide if it's completely heretical. I watched a doc about a monk on Mount Athos that could speak to people that didn't speak the same language. That seems correct to me. Gibberish, not so much. Thanks. Yes. Yes, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Obviously, the you can see there are two kind of versions of the symbolism of tongues. You see it in Acts, where this is the one that you saw in Mount Athos, which seems to be actually the one that reveals the mystery of the incarnation much more, which is the idea of people who have the gift of speaking in languages that they don't know, or they have the gift of speaking and other people understand them despite the fact that it's not their language. That seems to be what Christianity is about. It seems to be that Christianity is the thing which can, not a universalism in the sense of swallowing all the particulars into itself, like kind of sucking them up and just becoming one thing, but rather that it can reach into other languages and that it has the capacity to be translated into all the different cultures and have its own, have each culture become a member of the body in that sense. So without negating multiplicity. So that seems to be far more in tune with what we see in Acts. But there is also in the in Scripture the idea of speaking the tongues of angels, and you see that in St. Paul, the description of when he talks about how the people who speak tongues should have someone to interpret, or else they're doing it in vain or whatever. And this is really interesting because this is where you see, and I've talked about this, the problem of the extremes. When I talk about the idea of the fool or the clown, and I talk about how the idea of, let's say, the crown of thorns, but the thorns as the fall, this notion that the periphery is like a circle which goes lower and higher than what's in the middle, right? It's kind of like this. It's like the crown above is also the horns of the animal, this death, right? And so it's the same word. It's the same thing. So this is, I think, seems to be an example of where there really is this confusion, where the language of angels, which should be the highest language, ends up being flipping, or not flipping, but ends up appearing as this confused gibberish, this Tower of Babel gibberish. And the idea that people could get into this gibberish, this kind of Tower of Babel gibberish, and somehow think that this is this divine revelation is absolute nonsense, right? It's absolute nonsense. It contradicts everything about how the world is made. It's completely insane to think that this would somehow, that now. You also have to be careful. The problem is that if it would not be completely unfathomable to imagine that someone could appear to be saying things that are gibberish, but then ultimately they would be manifesting the highest pattern. But I think that this is kind of like when I talk about the holy fool. Now, the problem is that because our world is so level, we don't understand hierarchies, then we confuse the regular fool with the holy fool. We think that the fool is always a holy fool. The fool is not always a holy fool. And most of the time, 99% of the time, gibberish is gibberish. And in those churches, I am pretty sure that gibberish is gibberish because these charismatic churches that split every other 2 years, and that that they're constantly breaking up, and they have these contradictory prophecies and all this stuff, is just so the tongues are just another sign of this absolute fragmentation of these non-denominational churches that are all over the place and that are all saying different things and having all these different visions and all this stuff. So it's like the tongues are just an example of that. But like I said, if you saw someone speaking the highest patterns of reality and you didn't have access to them, they might look like gibberish. And I'll give you an example. And again, I don't want to bring it back on me. This is not, I'm not saying I speak in tongues, but there are some videos that have gotten more views, let's say. And those videos, when they kind of reach into the algorithm of YouTube, and especially if it's a video where I'm talking to you guys, where I'm talking to the people who follow my videos, who have developed this symbolic structure, this symbolic language, they hear me talk about symbolism, and you can see it in the comments are like blah blah blah, gibberish, gibberish, gibberish. They think that I'm spouting absolute gibberish. Because they don't see the pattern, then when I speak the pattern and I talk about these analogies, they just see nonsense. And so we have to be careful too, because the highest pattern for those who don't understand them might look like gibberish. Not that they are, they're not. They're the very opposite of gibberish. Hope that makes sense. I feel like I've confused you guys with that answer. Well, we'll see.